Hello, welcome to Awaken and Align.
Oh my God, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's so nice to have you here to talk to you in person again. I met you in, when was it, the summer of this year?
Oh my God, I feel like it was very close to last eclipse season, actually.
Yeah, it
Like,
was, wasn't it?
yeah, because it was still a little chilly, but it wasn't super warm. It was like that in between New York spring weather, all of 10 days, I feel like.
Yes, so we just closed out an eclipse cycle here, 6 month cycle.
Love it.
Um, Gosh, where to even begin? So I met you through Instagram, and it must have been that I wrote something about Pluto, right? Because you are Tasha Beck, aka Agent Pluto, Agent of Pluto.
Agent of Pluto, yeah. It's so funny because until I got my birth chart read, which was in 2020, believe it or not, during my Saturn return, I never identified with like, astrology was like so foreign to me. And then when I see Pluto on my ascendant, I was like, oh my God,
Hmm.
yeah, life makes sense now. Everything makes sense. Like, are you kidding me? So I feel particularly magnetized to any type of plutonic situation. Anyone posts about Pluto, I'm like, I'm there.
You're like
What'd you say?
me?
Hello?
Yeah, and it's so funny because I met another astrologer, Stephanie Campos, because of Pluto as well, because she has a Pluto square, her sun, in
Mm,
angular houses. And I
powerful.
was literally, we literally bonded over Pluto because I was telling her about my Pluto square saga that I've been going through for the last 3 years. And, if you're not an astrologer, you don't really understand what that means. Like, you can tell the background of your story, of your life. You're going through some kind of struggle, right? But you can't like pinpoint it, right?
Yeah.
Slow burn. But the minute you tell an astrologer, they're like, oh, thoughts and feelings.
Send flowers, everything, RIP.
Right? And you just like get it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
honestly, like I only talk to astrologers about this because they're the only people who understand like what this journey means. So before we get into Pluto, and this is our offering to Hades, the Lord of the Underworld. Thank you very
Mm.
much. I want to hear a little bit about your origin story. Like you have such an interesting background, and you can go as far back as you want, but like, where were you born? What did you want to be? What did you do? Like,
Oh my
welcome
gosh.
to New York.
I feel like my story is quite plutonic, actually. So I was born in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. I'm half Malaysian, half Pakistani. So I have Saturn and Aquarius, opposing my sun. So that was a whole lot of fun growing up. It's also funny because I'm currently based in New York and I'm on another Pluto line for myself.
Mm.
So if I'm for people listening, I'm speaking astrocartographically, astrocartograph. That's a hard word to say, but from an astrocartography perspective, I was born where Pluto kind of was very energized for me, and now I'm in New York where it's almost like I'm confronting a lot of my demons, a lot of my childhood demons, and I know it sounds really, really intense and scary. I love being on the Pluto line. I find Pluto lines really empowering if you allow them to be, you know. But my story of how I even got into astrology, oh my gosh. So, what brought me to New York was actually a career in finance. I was on Wall Street for 10 years. I started out in investment banking. Um, I think literally the last Venus retrograde cycle back in 2015, I was like, I'm out, I'm done, I don't want this anymore. I had literally phantom chest pains, which is so Leo, so heart oriented. And I was like, this is not the life for me. This is not working out. And so I kind of moved into other realms of finance, like investor relations, business development for hedge funds, for institutions, like the whole shebang. And then I got sexually harassed at work. And
Mhm.
it's not the first time I gotten sexually harassed, mind you. I also have Venus and Mars conjunct. So there is a certain magnetism now that I understand about my chart. But it was the first time, this was in December 2019, that I felt that I had witnesses and I had people who could corroborate my narrative. Because, I'm a skeptic. I don't feel like people believe my words like that. Another Saturn Sun moment.
Mm.
But when, I reported it, it was very, oh, he was drunk and he doesn't remember. And
Mm.
I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And I'm like, there's a witness. And they're like, yeah, but they're not sure. And I'm like, oh my God, this is not it. And I realized I'm not in an environment that is going to look out for me. I know this and I've always known this, but to come face to face with that cold hard truth was kind of really sobering, And I ultimately found astrology because I was looking for a healing modality that could help me understand what had happened, why it had had to happen, on top of a whole lot of other things that have happened in my life. And when I got my reading, it was so powerful. It was one of those moments where, yeah, you've definitely felt disempowered your whole life. And it leaks out of you, And Pluto is very real this way. It's something I tell my clients all the time. Everyone has a really strong potential around lying to themselves. The ego is so strong. And you can convince yourself of anything,
Mhm.
especially if you're very disconnected to the soul, right?
Mhm.
But when Pluto is getting activated or really, really coming alive in your chart, it's almost like, okay, well, were you really lying? Is the energy holding up? And it picks up on that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and so ultimately, I decided I wanted to be an astrologer. Like, fuck this. This life is not for me. I wanted to make other people feel seen the way I felt seen and to really not necessarily use this as your main form of therapy, but people just need a place to be seen, to like have their trauma be seen, to have their hurt and shame be seen. And like it's very plutonic and I love it. And I feel like it also gives me the types of clients or attracts the type of clients that need that in their
Yeah.
life.
And so you have Pluto on your ascendant, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And so for people who are listening who don't understand what that means, what does that mean?
Well, it means a lot of things. It means that I believe that I am truly an agent of Pluto, the planet that is on your ascendant. You kind of act as like a conduit or decoy or a vessel
Mhm.
for whatever energy is coming through. And for me, because Pluto's on my ascendant, there is an aura of intensity, some people might say about myself. And,
I think
maybe
that's a compliment.
I'm like and I know what I don't like. And energetically, I know if we'll vibe or not. And I also know that I think people are afraid if they're saying something wrong. They're like, we always have to walk on eggshells with you. I'm like, why? Because you will always get the most honest, energetic response from me. Like,
Mhm.
you say something really off kilter, I immediately like,
Mhm.
what do you mean by that? What was that word choice about? Do you really like intend to, was that intentional? What secrets are you hiding? Like all these things go through my mind and my energy shifts and people feel it in the room. But I've kind of moved on. I'm like, okay, well, I'm done with that. I don't really necessarily want to fuck with you like that, but I'm going to shift my attention elsewhere. But other people, that energy lingers for. And it's like really, really, I mean, intense is quite honestly the best way to describe it for better or for worse. But I love it
Yeah.
though.
And I guess we should have started with Pluto in general.
Pluto.
Like Pluto, the planet, Pluto. Do you resonate with the mythology of Hades, or do you have a different like cosmology that you work with?
No, I think, I love all the symbolism around Hades or on Pluto. I mean, I just lit my Medusa candle, I love the idea of the misunderstood
Mhm.
villain archetype.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I think that's something that brought me to like my entertainment podcast where I'm like trying to humanize the shit out of everyone and not to say, look,
Yeah.
some things happen and some people do really bad things, right? And I'm never gonna discount that. Um, but when you take it down a notch and when you try to understand people's motivations around things, I think Pluto is very, very helpful. And at the end of the day, I mean, if I were Hades, I would feel kind of annoyed. I feel like I got left out of all this fun. Very Aries like too, right? Like I get left out of all this
Yeah.
like sun and all these really great things, and now I have to like be underground. I'm gonna make the best of it, but I'm so powerful because
Mhm.
all these souls report to me and like fundamental like there's so much of that symbolism around hidden treasure and riches beneath, and you have to really dig deep, right? And so all of that I truly identify with for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah, when I started really, again, like I said, being obsessed with Pluto, because Pluto brings up obsessions, it's a key word. I I started also expanding my awareness around other mythologies. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
Pluto or Hades in what is it, Greek mythology,
Mm-hmm.
is the lord of the underworld, right? And I also think of like Kali Ma or Shiva, like the destroyer, Pele, the
Mm-hmm.
Hawaiian goddess, who like, I think of like destruction as a form of burning down what no longer serves you. And my 15-year Pluto transit in Capricorn felt like that. Felt like we're going to slowly burn this down. And for part
Oh.
of that journey, you don't even realize it's happening because it's sometimes like a
Mm-hmm.
slow burn until it starts like hitting your natal placements. And then you're like, oh, okay,
We feel it. We feel
feel
that
it.
fire.
Oh yeah. So if you don't resonate with Greek mythology, I would look into your if your ancestors have like an underworld god or goddess. Because I do think there is like a goddess archetype to this as well. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
Medusa, um, and Eris, the goddess of discord. I think any kind of archetype that takes some structure, whether it's like literal or mental, psychological, and burns it down so that you can create a new self concept of yourself and the world, right? At large.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that trend, I think it's so easy for us as astrologers to kind of go into this repetition mode. Like, what does Pluto mean to you? And what does the
Mhm.
symbolism mean to you? Like, transformation, death, rebirth. And there's such huge fucking concepts. And so I'm really glad that you've articulated, even, it's not just structural, right? It's not just the material plane. It's very much about programming and that
Mhm.
narrative. And, you know, to bring up something that you recently shared about, your victim narrative and how that's evolved, which everyone should go check out that episode. I felt I got a lot out of it. So thank you for sharing. But Pluto, that's what Pluto, it's like Saturn, it's tough love, but it
Mhm.
really is love for your greatest self, even if your
Yes.
ego like cannot take it
Yeah.
because it's so, so rooted in that comfort and that attachment of the way things are.
Yeah. It goes to the root
Mm-hmm.
and our base needs. Like if you think about like the chakra system and like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's like your base needs of safety and security. And Pluto takes that away and wants you to see like your own power, like what you're really made of. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a time in your Pluto journey where you're just going to be up in your head, be like, what am I doing wrong? And you're going to cling to your victim story. But then I don't know. I want to hear your story and how you moved through that. But it was almost like this gradual, and I think that's why I like Pluto, like strong word. That's why I respect Pluto because it happens gradually enough where you integrate it. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like fast like Mars or, it's like very
Mm-hmm.
gradual. So how have you worked with Pluto since it's literally on you?
Yeah, literally. So it's actually quite interesting. So Pluto also squares, midheaven, Jupiter, and my Mercury, in my 10th.
Mm.
And I actually think a lot of my Pluto work involves my relationship with my mother, my 10th house representation, how much I've internalized her fears, her sense of burden, her everything, even, her relationship with my father, how she chose to portray a certain narrative versus what was actually happening. All very Plutonic stuff. But it's actually funny, your story about the, victim narrative evolving. I was in a pretty emotionally abusive relationship. My first super serious one, freshman in college, like, hey, let's go. And he was like a senior or someone like older who had gotten a job and was all these things. And it's funny, after this full moon in Aries, I realized I had blocked certain things out that were just coming back, with this Mars Pluto square right now. And one of the defining things that I remember him saying to me that just came back was, you literally have victim stamped on your forehead. Ha ha ha, joke.
Wow.
And powerful, right?
Yeah.
Like, and at the time, I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm so naive. I'm like so bandy. And I'm like, oh, like maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. People think I'm nice. I guess they want to come to me, they want to talk to me. But I realized, yeah, no, LOL Pluto's like, bitch, get this out of your head. Like, literally, I would get the craziest stories, like how I got robbed on a date, or like my dating life was just always so interesting to a lot of people and it was always filled with intrigue. And I would always be very distant and I would always never want to form an intimate connection. But that victim word really, 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 I think I internalized, to be honest,
Mhm.
for through my whole entire 20s. This
Mhm.
idea that, like, I am not here for myself, I'm here to serve other people. I have Mars and Venus in Virgo too. So, very interesting how that correlates or comes to play. But it was very much always like, oh, other people, like these things just keep happening to me. And like, this is just whatever, right? And I just got out of an eighth house year as well. So it's been a lot of
Fun.
healing with my mom. Yeah, lots of that. And I recognize in my current relationship how I prescribe to that narrative without even realizing it, And it's one thing to, oh, understand you're the victim when you tell a story, but it's another thing to kind of operate like a victim when you tell the story because there's a lack of self-awareness and you think you can do all the work, right? You think you've done work, you think you've like made strides around it, and then Pluto is here again trying to disprove your lies to yourself. Hey, actually, not true. You are still very much operating in this victim mentality. And so this retrograde this summer to me too was so intense because I was like reaching out. I want to be adored. I want to be desired. I want all these things. Like, oh my God, am I getting these in my relationship? Like, really, really intense. And I think a lot of people are feeling the same way. But when Venus went direct, I really appreciate Pluto's pushing me to really challenge myself.
Mhm.
Okay, if other people aren't giving you what you need, let me then ask myself this question. Have you been actually prioritizing yourself enough in
Mhm.
your relationships? And have you actually dealt with the fear of becoming a priority? Because for so long, you've
Oh,
internalized this fear of being a victim.
yeah. Whoa, that is so good. Ah, oh my gosh.
Oh,
Yeah, and before we even pressed like record, you were saying how when you start sharing these thoughts and feelings and ideas, it helps other people to like have their own aha moments. And I just had one myself, so thank you.
mm. You know,
Yeah.
Pluto, I don't know if this was something that we had spoken about before recording too, but like how you said Saturn gives gifts or like,
Mhm,
Pluto is so much
mhm.
about self-sacrifice. I actually would disagree. I think Pluto's greatest gift is this sense of empowerment you
Yeah,
get
for
from
sure.
it. And
Yeah.
it's a feeling unlike any other, to be quite honest. Like Saturn deals with the material realm and accomplishment. And so everything you see comes quite tangibly. But
Mhm,
Pluto's gifts are harder to define. It
mhm,
just creates this energetic opening And I think it's so, you talk about writing your book on manifestation, and it is so tied. You
Yeah.
have to be able to understand what you're working with, excavate, alchemize, and then be able to attract because there's an opening
Mm-hmm.
versus this blockage.
Yeah, I think what I meant is, so I was telling before we press record, we were talking about Pluto
Mhm.
and the difference between Pluto and Saturn. I have a Saturn Pluto conjunction. Yay.
Oh,
And
fun
Saturn,
times right now.
yeah, Saturn, right? Like Saturn, in my experience, you're right. It's like very material realm. It's like this is what you have to do. It's work you have to do. It's discipline. It's responsibility that you do maybe every day. For me, it's like I know this is more of like a moon thing, but like a ritual, right? Like every day I'm going to put my effort into this because I know one day down the line, it's going to come back to me like tenfold. Pluto for me is like, I don't know, I don't remember what it's called. We used to do this in yoga teacher training where you would take like almost like sand or powder and you would put it into the fire as like an
Mm.
offering. And so for me, offering is like you give something
Hmm.
and it doesn't necessarily come back in the same form.
Mm.
Like you burn something, you do like a fire ritual and you burn something down, you're not going to get that form back, but it might come in a different, it's transmuted in a different way.
Hmm.
So for me,
Hmm.
like Pluto, it's in my, it's currently transiting my second house. And for me, it was a lot about money and my sense of worth and confidence. And so a lot of like financial ups and downs. um I might not get that money back, but it came in a different form, in the form of like self-confidence. You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Totally,
Yeah.
totally.
It's like
The
you could take
alchemy
all
is
my
real.
money, but like what it showed me when it took like that root like security thing was I'm so much more than the material. Like I can release control in this thing because I what I have inside my soul is so much worth so much more.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's that inner riches,
Mm-hmm.
right?
The
That
inner treasure, like you were saying, yeah.
hmm
And it's in the sign of Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. So it's like the material realm.
literally.
Yay.
I I gotta say, this retrograde. So Pluto just stationed direct yesterday, of
Yeah.
course. Um, I feel I've not necessarily felt a Pluto retrograde as intensely as I have this past summer, even though I'm sure in my astrological career, like it's definitely resounded in different ways. But I definitely felt a lot of the Capricornian themes come up for me. And, when I'm realizing these and when I'm talking to my clients about them, everyone's like, oh my God, yeah, I like totally feel that. So, like, one big thing that came up for me was how do I disentangle achievement from joy?
Mm-hmm.
So Capricornian, everything always has to be, let me work hard, grind hard, play hard, hedonistic. Like it's not about balance, it's about extremes. And I realize, like, yeah, everything I do in my life is so extreme. Like, even a hobby has to be perfect and like I have to achieve, And then I was like, wait, no, I got out of finance to not do that anymore. And yet I am bleeding,
Yeah.
bringing in that mentality myself
Mm-hmm.
because there are parts of me that haven't dealt with the idea of success and the idea of failure and how do I actually really feel about it and what does that mean for other people and how they perceive me, like a lot of that energy coming through for me at least. But it's been very interesting for
Yeah.
sure. It's in my
I
third house.
Oh, well, I was gonna say at least it sextiles you.
Hmm.
Capricorn to me is New York. Like the
Oh
energy
yeah,
is
so
Capricorn.
cap.
So it's kind of hard. I was gonna say it's kind of hard to get out of that when you're in it.
It's like New York's also Libra rising, so the idea of cap sun, like Libra rising, just always this perfectionist veneer, but underneath
Mhm.
it's like everyone grinding, 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 and
Yes.
working. It's so
Yeah.
in the DNA of the city. It's unreal.
Yes. Wait, are you a Leo? Did I remember that?
I'm Oh my gosh, I'm so close. I am Leo's. I would love to be one, but I'm a 28-degree Cancer sun.
Oh, that's right. Right, right, right.
I
That's
have my
right.
Chiron in Leo at 0 degrees, however.
Oh, so you're having a Pluto Sun opposition.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
time.
Fun.
Good time. I mean, in tandem with that, I'm also having like Saturn doing its retrograde dance right now is
Right.
opposing my Venus and Mars conjunction. And
Oh,
Uranus is also opposing my ascendant. It's really intense in my chart at the
yeah.
moment.
Wow. Wow. Your soul really was like, I'm here to do some serious work.
Oh my God. I mean, look, the most sobering moment of this whole relationship struggle for me this summer was when I realized it's me. I'm the problem. I'm
Mhm.
the fucking problem. I'm so Taylor Swift right now. She's a Scorpio rising. So,
Yeah.
like, Anti-Hero is the best Scorpio rising song. I just want to say, like, it hits very, very
Yeah.
deeply, honestly. But the moment I decided to actually look at myself in the mirror and realize how I was conducting my relationships, and this is not just my romantic relationships,
Mhm.
these are my friendships. This is every person I've had a relationship with. I've started to come to this understanding it's not them, it's really you.
Mhm.
And it's okay. It's okay. But you kind of have to like actually work with that and
Yeah.
integrate it. You can't just sit with this, oh my God, okay, now what do I do? So it's really been pushing me to dig deeper in all my relationships as a consequence, right? It's allowing me to maybe breathe more room for, I don't know, forgiveness, for compassion. And like ultimately, that's what Pluto is trying to do. Pluto tries to get, I guess, to have you think about the worst thing that's ever happened to you and hopefully alchemizing it into that was the best thing that ever fucking happened.
Yeah.
Like me getting sexually harassed, best thing that happened. And then this is not to discount other people's experiences and other people's trauma and other people's healing journeys, but for my personal journey, I needed that to happen. I was never going to leave. I was going to be stuck to my golden handcuffs. I was going to be stuck to my very, very limiting self worth. And I just had no idea how to handle my sexuality and how that was going to be projected onto me. Like I could not handle all those things. And Pluto was like, we're going to keep making things a little annoying for you until you figure it out for yourself
Until you
because
take your power back. Yeah.
exactly because we love you this much we do not want to see you deal with this continuously but at the same time you're stubborn AF you need to figure this out and it's very much bend not break type of energy and again I do not want to discount anyone's experience around sensitive issues like this and it is domestic violence in the national like there's a
Yeah.
lot of awareness around stuff like that and again, everyone's experience, everyone's journey is so deeply personal. And as someone who identifies as pretty plutonic, all I can say is I deeply empathize. And all I want is for you to find that light at the end of your healing journey so that you can kind of avail yourself of this huge, immense weight of emotion that might be plaguing
Mhm.
you.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. These are our life decisions, like mine and your own. It's no one's business to tell you like what you should be doing, how you should be forgiving, how you should be healing. If you decide not to do that, that's your decision. That's what I always say, because
Mm-hmm.
everybody also, like I say in my episode, is like our victim stories mutate and transmute over time. And so like maybe you do forgive and then next year you're like fuck you. Forget
Mm-hmm.
it, you still annoy me.
We're only human,
We're
we're
only
only
human,
human.
feelings change sometimes, with new evidence and new like truths coming out, you just never know how these stories shift. So that's one thing that I really recognize from this like recent Pluto retrograde was like, oh, it's continuously shifting, like um a couple years ago, I was very attached to my victim story. I just
Mhm.
was like, there's no fucking way I could ever forgive my parents, like specifically my father. Like he's just dead to me, dead to me. And then I just realized I had to let it go because it wasn't
Mm.
allowing me to be in the right energy to call in the things that I wanted when I was holding on to these like stories, you know? So
Yeah.
I just personally was ready, but that's my own journey.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's so interesting, I really resonated. I think, we're both Asian women and, culturally, not to lump every Asian in the same category, of course, but I do think there is like a cultural experience that does get shared. And it
Mhm.
was definitely something I had to unlearn and forgive with my mother. Um, and growing up in Malaysia, corporal punishment and discipline and things like that were like very synonymous, and no one really batted an eye. It was like, oh,
Yeah.
your dad hit you with the belt. Oh, my dad
Yeah.
did this. Like, let's
Yeah.
one up this sympathy Olympics here, right? And you're like, oh my God, what is this timeline I'm living in? Um, and when I think back, I mean, yeah, gnarly eighth house here. Mercury rules my eighth house. For people, Mercury's in my 10th house and it squares my Pluto. And so for me, what that meant was there was a lot of past patterns of programming, internalized trauma from how I perceived my mother's actions and, with that Mercury square Pluto for me, right? So a big moment. And I really came to terms with the level of abuse I received. And it's not to say I love my mother very much. And we've had some intense confrontations about it over the past year that involve me standing up for myself like, hey, I'm not necessarily ready to have this
Mhm.
type of relationship with you yet, this friend relationship, because we haven't dealt with the big sort of boogeyman under the bed, like we need to talk about some things and I need to express my rage and my discontentment as a child, at least on behalf of my inner child,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
I mean, brutal fucking year, brutal, brutal, brutal year.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, it's like, it's not easy, these transits or these activations, or when Pluto kind of leaves fingerprints in your chart. It's not easy at all. But that being said, it's the most honest conversation I've ever had with my mother. It is the most, I mean, to literally tell your mom, hey, I don't appreciate the time you literally did this to me when that was not okay. And then to receive defense
Uh-huh.
mechanisms around it. And you're like, no, no, I understand why you're hurting. And I understand this is hurtful also for me to
Mhm.
say, but I'm hoping that we're both arriving with the goal of healing. Right. And I
Mhm.
think it really helped her maybe get on board with it. Like, okay, I'll give you some space to think. I will come back to this conversation with you. And like, we can have more friendly conversations because now we've dealt with what was buried very
Yeah.
meaningfully.
Oh gosh, I went through that whole journey as well, like the defensiveness, the gaslighting, and
Mm.
it took years to get to this point. So I just have to say that. Like people always have this idea just based on what they see on social media, but like behind the scenes, it's like you did this to me. And then, my mom saying like, no, I didn't. What are you talking about? And you're like, what?
So casual. So casual.
Like, what do you mean? Yeah, and that whole journey is a journey in itself because like our inner child just wants to be safe and it just
Mhm.
wants to be taken care of. And then another thing that came up during this Pluto journey, which these things don't happen in a vacuum, right? There's other planets in the sky, other activations going on that trigger these things. And was that I don't need to like protect my inner child anymore. Like she's good. She's actually way more fierce. She's a survivor. And like now adult Laura has to like catch up almost,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
I have a
Yeah.
fifth
Oh,
house
I love
son,
that.
so my inner child is very important to me.
Yeah. Oh my God. I was actually just telling someone yesterday too, like they had like a moon in their fifth, and I'm like, you need to really incorporate more play.
Yes.
And you really need to like maybe spend time with kids to
Hmm.
relearn that sense of play.
Hmm.
Really important with that fifth house. Oh, I love your fifth house, son.
Yeah. In Aries.
Oh, I mean, I was gonna say, I have a Sag moon, you're a Sag rising, right?
Mhm.
I think, and Stephen Forrest would say this about SAGs, like you were kind of here to make some very interesting mistakes, and have
Uh-huh.
these really interesting
Yeah.
experiences.
Yes.
Because that's where you alchemize wisdom from. Like there's a reason why SAG follows Scorpio. There's magic and alchemy in both
Hmm.
those signs, and Pluto rules Scorpio, obviously, and Jupiter rules SAG. And so to me, Jupiter and Pluto
Hmm.
kind of are allies
Yeah.
working towards that same goal. But Pluto's like, let's dig deep to uncover, and Jupiter's like, let's find that wisdom and then expand it, right? So you get that
Mhm.
connectivity energetically between the two signs.
Do you work with like Pluto ruling over Scorpio? Like, do you work with that modern signification?
I do both, but I definitely lean more into Pluto only because I feel like Pluto also hasn't gotten that much love from a lot of astrologers, or it's kind of
Yeah.
just like, moved on. And I'm still working my way through Jeffrey Wolf Green's, his idea of Pluto and how it is really like the main reason we kind of are here on this plane to work through our Pluto, and the nodes are the vessels in which the Pluto kind of comes out through. So different school of thought, but definitely something I'm really interested in. I've only recently started identifying Mars as a co-ruler of my chart. So it goes,
I was gonna say,
yeah,
that, well, I was gonna say Taylor Swift has Mars and Scorpio, so her ruler is in her first house. Like
yeah.
when I think about Scorpio risings, I think about like resourceful, like very, they dig deep, they like find who they really are, sometimes through because of trauma.
Oh my God. I think it's so deeply tied. I mean, if you fan out every rising sign, right, you can kind of get the essence for what
Mhm.
the sign is all about. And so if you're a Scorpio rising with all this Leo in the 10th house, part of your mission and part of your goal in this lifetime is to kind of unite your mission with self. But a lot of that is going to come from that deep vulnerability.
Totally.
So it's easy to disassociate and not necessarily
Mhm.
acknowledge. And then you kind of put on a front, but the magic happens across those axes where you're allowing yourself to, okay, understand where am I really detaching from, where really, things are not okay, and where can I really step into that power. So very, very linked. I always wondered why Scorpio rising so private in theory. Like that's the one sign I actually have a hard time identifying people just from like looking. Because Scorpio risings, like some people who have Scorpio risings, I'm like, wow, I would never in a
Oh,
million
they're
years.
the ones that I can figure out right away.
Oh, really? I'm
There's
like
like
blind
a
spot.
there's like an I know, right? There's like an energy. There's an energy and an aura about Scorpio risings that I can just pick up on very quickly. I'm like, yes. And also
Mm,
like the features of somebody, like they're very smoldering and
yeah.
like magnetic, but again, mysterious. And you're
Mm,
like, why am it's like a moth to a flame. You're like, why am I attracted to this person?
yeah. Oh my gosh. You know what? Actually, there was like a really so I was at this astro conference called Astro Bash over the full moon in Aries, which oh my God, honestly, I highly recommend everyone go. It felt like a spiritual retreat
Mhm.
and conference all at once. But I met another woman, an older woman, who also had Pluto on her ascendant. She was a Scorpio. I think, yeah, she had Pluto on her ascendant. I don't know if she was a Scorpio rising, but she had shared a story, and I thought this was so striking about when she was younger. She would always kind of get put in these really like sexually inappropriate environments, or like kind of notice like the undertones of like I don't know, like in sexual inappropriateness happening in her environment. And she shared the story of how when she was younger, dudes would just grab her boobs randomly and like not
Oh
think
my God.
twice about it. And she'd be like, what is happening? And it'd be so jarring and confusing, right? You're like kind of stilted
Mhm.
and shocked. And I was like, oh my God, like that happened to me. Some dude literally would just grab my boob and act like it was okay. And I was in a lesser power version of myself. So I was like sitting there like, what are you doing? And the worst part was I was waiting for everyone else to say something, but no one, of course, would say anything. And so
Right.
I'm like, I'm gonna fucking say something eventually, but I never did, And now if I think back to that version of me, I'm like, holy shit. But it was so striking that both of us with that similar placement
Mhm.
had a really, really similar experience like that. It's
Mhm.
almost like you magnetize all
Mhm.
these fears and all these, and not to say you bring things on yourself, I don't want to conflate. These are really metaphysical, really nuanced things that we're talking about. And ultimately, there was a part of me, I think, that was that victimhood, that internalized victim
Mhm.
getting leaked out into the universe, and people were taking advantage of that
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's wild. You
energy.
know, it's wild when you meet people who are like your chart twins and you're like, oh my God. We have
Yes.
similar like I just found my twin chart, Dane Rudyard. Do you know Dane
Oh
Rudyard?
my God,
We
you're
have
chart twins with Rudy are amazing.
we both are Sag risings, Aries, Sun, Aquarius moons, and Mercury in Pisces. And literally he said something in one of his books that said, "I'm interested in astrology, psychology, music, and art." And a lot of people think that they're separate, but they're the same. I was like, "Oh my God, me too!
You get
You
me.
get me!" So I suggest everybody look at your chart and find your chart twin. It's so
Yes.
validating.
Oh my God,
Have
it's
you found yours?
incredible. I actually think Selena Gomez and I have a pretty similar chart just because she's
I'm
born
so
like
jealous.
so close. Well,
Selena
her
Gomez,
songs hit. Her songs kind of hit,
I
and
love
I for
her.
I she hits. She hits.
She
I
does.
will say, like, yeah, every time her song hits, I'm like, oh my God, that really hits on a very, very deep level. But I
Mhm.
forget, I don't know what her rising is. That's a thing. But I know, like, because we're born very, very close, like placements are
Uh-huh.
pretty similar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Got
I
it.
need to
Got
like
it.
go investigate more. I feel like I
Yeah.
just see myself in a lot of, not a lot of people, but like if there are prominent things, I'll be like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I see that vibe
Yeah.
for sure.
I found my sister's twin chart twin, Amy Winehouse, because they were
Oh
born
my
the same day.
God.
So they have a Venus in Leo retrograde with Mars conjunction. They have different rising signs, but yeah, I was like, I
Mm.
found your chart twin. So
And
exciting.
it just tells you so much more. I think Chris Brennan's chart twin is Katy Perry.
Stop it. I
I
love
think
that.
he's I think he said something like that. Like, yeah, I'm always like watching like
Well,
what's
she's like
happening
a
with
triple
Katy.
Scorpio. She's like a super Scorpio.
She's VV Scorpionic. VVV Scorpionic. Yes. Even though again, I guess like her songs make sense. Like, even
Yeah.
like the I Kissed a Girl, like everything. And then now it's so much about empowerment. So I almost wonder what her personal Scorpio journey has been and Pluto journey has been to get from, you know,
Oh yeah,
how she grew up.
she was a preacher's daughter and like,
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
and she had a hit song called I Kissed a Girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very Scorpionic.
Very
Very,
scorpionic.
very, yeah. I mean, Scorpios keep things, and Mars is moving into Scorpio
Yeah.
literally so soon. So, interesting
Yeah.
times, interesting energy.
Well, the reason why I first asked you about Pluto and your significations, because this is my fallen debilitated Mercury in Pisces. Okay. I get sidetracked here. Is
There's a greater vision, there's a greater vision unearthing. We just have to like sit through and wait for it.
thank you. Um, is what is your astrological background? Because not many people know about evolutionary
Mhm.
astrology.
Yeah, so I would consider myself an evolutionary astrologer primarily, but it doesn't mean that I'm not open to, either like perfection years or other Hellenistic techniques that help inform my understanding. I do feel like when I look at class it as my main house system, even though I do take into account whole sign. Again, I feel like I'm a very mix and match type of astrologer, but my principles are rooted in evolutionary astrology. And the main difference, I think, because I do feel like
Mhm.
astrology as a whole is moving towards that evolutionary
Mhm.
type of language. You know, it's all about self actualization, it's all about taking ownership, it's all about transmuting and like moving forth and growing and evolving. That's kind of where you get evolutionary from. But we look at the nodes, as kind of like really, really important, almost like the bookends, like where is the book headed? Where is it's coming from? What chapters? And you kind of see aspects to the nodes. You kind of get your past life story
Yeah.
because a lot of us come in reincarnated. And so reincarnation is a big thing in evolutionary astrology. It's a
Mhm.
very metaphysical. It's almost like, there's astrology, and then you take it
Mhm.
one level further. Like we're talking about souls now. We're talking about what your soul chose as your natal chart to
Mhm.
come into this lifetime to learn and unlearn and hopefully get to that higher alignment for yourself. It's not to say you don't pick up any more karma along the way, but you're here dealing with some main karma. And oftentimes, more often than not, it will actually bleed into your life in such a way. I keep saying bleed, so plutonic, right? But it
Yeah.
does kind of, seep into everything you're doing, habits. So even if there's like a past life story that seems so like random, like what? You kind of intern like the soul doesn't forget, the soul remembers. So things usually resonate like, oh my God, that core theme really hits now. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, now I have awareness around it. What do I want to do with it? Do I want to keep repeating this pattern or do I want to alchemize?
Yeah.
So I love evolutionary astrology. It's what I kind of got introduced to. And I'm actually at the Forrest Center of Evolutionary Astrology just to be able to learn under Stephen Forrest, who I think is one of the most amazing minds, one of the sort of like early
Mhm.
founders, I would say, one of the main principles of evolutionary astrology as a branch. So if people are listening and, want to learn more, he's written a ton of books in such an accessible way. And I think it's so incredibly amazing. And like you'll get so much out of it that I think sometimes some astrology texts might be a little too technical or a little too, archetypal, but he has a way of really, really cinching it so that you feel a personal identification with it. Very
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah, I love evolutionary astrology because I personally believe that astrology is not just a intellectual thing. It's not just like you're looking at planets and like um
Mm-hmm.
aspects. I do believe it's a soul's evolution, and I do believe there's like an intuitive practice to it where
Mm-hmm.
like we can all learn, what does Mars mean? What does a square mean? But I do think there is something else going on with the chart that I feel like can it's a skill that can be cultivated, but I don't think it can be necessarily learned through a book per se.
No, no. And this is my saving grace for Pluto in Aquarius and the advent of AI because
Yeah.
people have been asking me, like, how do you feel? Actually, I'm a mute or not mute. I'm so sorry. Brooklyn is sirens, and with this eclipse energy, like shit's been popping off on my
Oh,
street. Like,
oh,
do
it's
you
okay.
hear
A little
this?
bit.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's like very intense, and I'm like, oh my God, what is happening out there? But I obviously AI kind of uses texts that have already been written and you kind of get like a really awesome response, and you're like when you type in like a basic transit in or like an activation and you're kind of like, oh my God, that like kind of hits and checks out. But that intuitive ability to establish a connection and to pull out what seems to be more striking to you at that moment in the chart is is an art form. It is interpretation. It is still new ways of coming up with ideas. And at the end of the day, like if you're not looking to even advance astrology from your own perspective and like push what the definitions could be, then are you even also really practicing astrology, right? So,
Right.
there is a
Yeah.
lot of that conversation. But the intuition, I think, saves the Pluto and Aquarius robot cuckoo.
Yeah. Oh, I am not worried about that at all. I feel like with Pluto in Aquarius, astrology is going to get more popular.
Hmm.
I think it's going to become more a part of our life like it used to be back in the ancient times, like I mean it already kind of is like why do you celebrate your birthday? Like
Hmm.
certain things like that. It's like the solstices, the equinoxes. I just think it's going to be more a part of like um our everyday life. Like people are going to maybe start to hire people based on astrological compatibility, and they're going to look
Hmm.
at their astrology when planning meetings. Maybe we don't have a meeting during a void of course moon, or you know what I'm saying?
Oh my God,
Like
totally.
maybe we should not work during an eclipse
Or retrograde.
or retrogrades, right? Yeah, I think it's just going to be more cyclical.
Honestly, that's the one thing in this new life that I'm like, oh my God, I don't have to work retrogrades. This is amazing. What a lifestyle change. But it really helps, it
Yeah.
really allows you to be more in tune with the rhythms. Like, I think I made a joke, like, regular time doesn't actually, like, sure, I'll plan things with my
Mhm.
friends on a secular level, but
Yeah.
my timing is not based on any of this. Like, if I could, I would take the whole Libra season off because, in whole sign, it's in my 12th house. Like,
Mhm.
if I could, I would. And without, like, Tasha, what are you doing? Da, da, da. And I realized that's maybe aggressive, but I love when astrology lets you know, hey, take a beat.
Yeah.
And all you need to do is just, okay, I'll take a beat. Like, I trust it's cool. Like,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that so much,
I literally
honestly.
tell my family it's Scorpio season, it's my 12th house, like goodbye.
Yeah.
I'm a hermit. I'm not talking to you. I'm not going out. I'll see you in Sag season. Goodbye.
Yes. Yes. I mean, if only more people like you would believe the emails I would send to my corporate life like before I left, like Mercury is in retrograde. Make sure everyone
Yeah.
type this is like a
Yes.
team email I'm sending out to like my team, like double check your calendar invites, double check the spelling, double check everything. It's okay to take your time with it. It's people like either thought I was crazy or wow, that really makes a lot of sense. And
No,
yeah,
I honestly
more
think
corporate.
I honestly think with Pluto going into Aquarius for 20 years, that's what's going to happen. Like it's going to be more, or I just project my ideas out there, but I think it's going to become more a part of our lives because people are going to see like it's working with the energy versus against it. It's working smarter, not harder. And I think Pluto in Capricorn was breaking down capitalism and making us like really
Hmm.
thinking about that, and is it
Mm.
serving us? Is it serving our time? And hopefully the next 20 years we can transform that story.
Yeah. I mean, let's hope that like it would involve less coups and less bloodshed and all these
Yeah.
good things. But, at the end of the day, like, again, Pluto is here to unearth
Mhm.
corruption. It's here to really make its presence felt. And it reflects sort of this collective wounding.
Yes.
Again, like, each one of us are responsible. Oh, I don't know who that is. Each one of us are responsible for our own, again, healing journey. But if we choose to not acknowledge, it feeds into the collective, and it
Right.
creates a bigger energetic type of muck or blockage or sewer system that needs, to get excavated. Hashtag New York with its fucking clogged sewage systems right
Oh
now.
my gosh, yeah. Yeah.
Literally, literally with Pluto in that fourth house, I'm just like, can you fix your home plumbing, please? Like,
Yeah.
this is not sustainable, Like, this is not okay as like a major big city to have your infrastructure fail a simple rainfall. And like, God knows what happens. I mean, we've had Sandy and stuff, but only more to come.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about your podcast and how you started doing that?
Oh my gosh, sure. So when I'm not talking about dark, depressing things, just kidding. Um, My Venus and Mars and Virgo like packed my life really, and I was like, well, let me make binging TV productive. So I co-host a pop culture Bravo weekly recap, if you will. And so we binge Housewife shows, we binge Bravo shows, and we also, if let's say there's a Sophie Turner, Joe Jonas moment, we fold that in as part of our weekly recap. But we view everything through an astrological lens. So it's basically like Sports Center meets astrology.
I
And
love
it's quick, it's fast. My co-host has like a Gemini stellium, so she keeps me
that.
in check before I go crazy. Like, let me go in
Mhm.
depth here. Um, but it's really cool, and I think the perspective I offer, as an evolutionary astrologer, it's not like, oh, she's a Sag, so this is what's going to be. And mind you, navigating that internet minefield is really interesting when you're trying to find the humanity in everyone, and people come with
Mhm.
very strong opinions, right? And
Oh,
so at the end of the day, it's a great educational tool, I think. And this is actually going to be a very plutonic story of how I even got into Bravo. I felt like I got into Bravo to help depression,
yeah.
my depression, a depressive episode, if you will.
Mhm.
And watching The Housewives and binging through the series really helped me get to a better place, because a lot of these women, I mean, God, Beverly Hills seasons 1 to 3, Real Housewives, you've got like abusive husband, you've
Yeah.
got no one talking about it, and then you get the
Yeah.
reveal, you get this really plutonic dark undertone,
Very true.
and you kind of see her go through it, and you're like, holy shit, I know this is reality TV and like there's a certain element of scripts here, but
Mhm.
this is not scripted. This is fucking someone's real life. And
Mhm.
like the more people you connect with via the show, I actually get a lot of clients from my podcast, because a lot of people are interested in astrology, don't necessarily know like how to dip their toes in it, but I'm presenting it, or we're presenting it in a way that's accessible, because we can still find the lightheartedness in it, but we're talking about real shit and we're talking about healing. And a lot of things hit, a lot of things resonate, at least from those who have let me know. I'm sure other things maybe not so much, but
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Like, actually, you're so right. Like, there is a Plutonian, especially because the one that I used to watch a lot was New York, just because
mm,
I'm from New York. And like,
yeah, yeah.
underneath, they were all going through something very deep, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I would say with
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the housewives, and finding the humanity in each of them, because also a lot of people don't have tools for healing.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all
Mm-hmm.
kind of running in a dysregulated nervous system kind of situation. So it's like, how can we get people well resourced enough to start this journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually really funny. A lot of the housewives have astrologers. They
Mhm.
bring healers onto the show,
Mhm.
and I'm sure it's become like a thing, right? For some people, like, oh, another healer, oh, another thing. Like,
Mhm.
does this even work? Whatever. But I actually think it's quite progressive for the housewives as like, an entire franchise across different cities. There is always a healer. There's always someone that is coming in to like help with the wounding and the journey. And sure, like, could there be some form of spiritual bypassing, which I think is pretty prevalent right now? Absolutely. But I do think that it opens up the conversation to
Mhm.
possibility. Oh, okay, like we're introducing this to an audience, we're introducing these modalities to an audience. Whether people choose to really engage with that or not, totally different story. But either way, a seed's been planted. And I think that's
Mhm.
really special.
And do they know about you? Like, I know you met a couple of them, right?
Yeah, so recently Emma and I, my co-host, actually got invited to read Giselle Bryant at her birthday, and she's an OG from the Real Housewives of
Yeah.
Potomac. And we got to read Ashley Darby and Jason Cameron. Like, so it's been a really amazing ride, and we actually just put out an episode. It's our first ever interview. We interviewed Margot Sisson from Below Deck Down Under, season 2, and what happened to her was such a plutonic story. Also, she was going through her Saturn return, or she's in the midst of her Saturn return. I don't know if you're familiar, but a
Mhm.
dude, and this is potentially trigger warning, like one of her colleagues, co-workers, crewmates got into bed naked with her, and she was so blacked out drunk. And they showed this on camera, and it was like he locked the door and he wouldn't let people in. People were telling him to leave, and then the producer stepped in, and then it was a whole thing. And the way they
Wow.
handled it was like, let's remove you from the. I mean, it was really jarring, and I'm really thankful that they didn't edit things out and they showed what was happening, because it could have so easily been a he said she said narrative, but it wasn't. And I'm so glad the producers were there to step in to like, hey, stop it. And there were just all these other plutonic things going on. And the show, I mean, it's called Below Deck, so it's really funny. So Pluto
Seriously.
under,
Yeah.
it's too much. It's too
Too much.
much. Um, but funnily enough, one thing that was interesting was where Margot was, and on that boat was her Jupiter and Scorpio line.
Ooh, I have Jupiter in Scorpio.
Oh. The mutual shimmying of that. Mm.
Because
Mm.
Jupiter's the ruler of my chart. And yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
I mean, for you, mad abundance, mad riches in a lot of your healing. There's so much power in that when you share,
Yes.
especially.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense though, because when I'm in like a group setting and we're doing like icebreakers, I'm like, what's your childhood trauma?
Yes, yes. Oh,
Who
your
hurt
Jupiter.
you?
Why are you like this? Please tell me more about yourself. Did you mean to turn out this way? Oh, does that honestly going on a date with a Jupiter and Scorpio person is must be incredible, honestly. Like I would love to be on a date with you, and I would love to hear the questions you have for me.
Oh my God. Well,
I
we
don't
well, we
think.
met each other. We met each other for the first time in the city. I feel like that's how I am. Like how I portray myself on social media is like
Mm.
how I am in person.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
when I meet you, I when I'm in a party situation, which like I'm a pretty extroverted person, but I will literally find one person to talk to in the corner like all night and like talk
Mm.
about everything,
Yeah, let's
like
merge souls.
let's literally like let's literally go into the underworld together.
Let's hold hands, buddy system, so that we don't get stuck like Persephone or Inanna. Like we can come out whenever we want.
Exactly, exactly. And it just makes so much sense because like I can't do small talk. It's really difficult for me. So I'll either like not talk at all or I'll just like
Mm.
ask people really in-depth questions.
Yeah. And this is why your whole chart is important, because like if you look at like, an Aries sun, Sag rising, where's your moon again?
It's in Aquarius, so it squares my
Yeah.
Twitter. Yeah.
I feel like, if you're just doing very high level back of the envelope type of astrology, like, oh, go get like there is a certain level of like, oh yeah, Aries always down for the fun, but also like maybe like the conversations don't necessarily
Yeah.
run that deep,
Right.
but
Yeah.
that aspect to Jupiter and Scorpio like really changes it up, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Then I think like when people meet me for the first time, they're like, "Oh, she's so fun and easygoing," and I'm like, "I want to take a blood oath with you."
Yes. Please tell me all your secret fears. I will promise to never turn them against you, as long as we keep this bond.
Exactly. So funny. It's so fun. I know I used to when I first got my chart read, I was like, "Oh my God, that is so intense, but that makes so much sense."
It's
Yeah.
I think as a society, we've been kind of conditioned that intensity is like somehow a bad word, like it somehow got bucketed under a
Yes.
negative or a con. And I'm like,
Mhm.
when did that happen? Because you want the intense, passionate, you want all these energies to really make something happen, to really
Right.
galvanize something, because you feel indifferent. Like to me, nothing feels worse than apathy or indifference. And I'm like,
Same. Oh man. Yeah.
right?
I
Like
relate.
I would rather feel something for you.
Mhm.
Because if I'm really strongly reacting to you, I know there's some work that needs to be done here, even though I'm like trying to take my medicine about it. And if I, feel really positive, it's like, oh my God, you are the best person in my life.
Mhm.
But if you fall in that middle
Oh,
where
yeah.
you don't make a stand, you kind of don't
Right.
really take ownership, you kind of just like
Hmm.
waffle through on the superficiality, I'm kind of like,
Hmm. That's like the
hmm.
opposite of Plutonian.
Yeah, literally. I mean, it's the Taurus Scorpio axis, right? In to
Right.
some degree. I literally had someone tell me, "Does everything have to be so complicated with you?" And then I was like, I looked at him and I was like, "Why do you have to be so simple?"
Oh, shit.
Boom.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Why are you just one dimensional? Like, what's that all about?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, what are you not telling me? Because you're not telling me a whole lot, and I know that, and I'm just waiting, and you're fronting. And that's the thing. It's like, I don't mind if you're messy. I don't mind if you're messy at all. I only care if you are being forthright with it. And you don't even have to tell me, but you just have to always be honest with how you're feeling about things and like what's happening and not pretending everything is like chill and okay. And if that's a mechanism for how you cope, sure, absolutely. But when it comes to real shit, it's like you kind of have like real life is messy,
Mhm.
and you have to give yourself the allowance to roll in the mud a little bit and like come out of it. Because if we all knew how to heal and break patterns immediately, like, oh my God, like there'd be no like what a different world that would be in. But that's not the world we live in. It's
Right,
complicated.
right. And I think that says a lot about, I mean, we could do a whole other episode about like when you're dating somebody or in relationship with somebody who has
Mm,
done this kind of work, it's really hard to relate. It's really hard to be in alignment anymore because um and I'm kind of finding this with my friendships right now, like I'm
mhm.
going through a huge like letting go phase because again,
Yeah,
not saying that I'm better than anybody, not saying that I'm like more evolved, but it's just the energy is different. Like
yeah,
I can't have conversations with you if we're not intellectually, emotionally in the same place, you know? And
yeah.
Pluto transit or a Pluto like story really does that to you.
Yeah, I think it's really important you said that, especially with this Mars Pluto square right now, with Mars in Libra and the South Node in Libra. Stephen Forrest said this term, like, it's so much about eschewing polite dishonesty right now.
Mm-hmm.
And, where are you being politely dishonest in your relationships about who you can energetically be yourself around, fundamentally?
Mm-hmm.
And the friendship thing is so, so real. Obviously, this was like a summer of breakups for divorces and celebs and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot, but friendships, I think, are sort of an under served narrative around this retrograde as
Mm-hmm.
well. I know like like all the big moments, and my friend groups like kind of laugh at me because I'm the person that will put friendships on pause. And like I need a tap out and we need to like reconfigure. And the thing is, I'm never tapping out with the intention of never coming back to the relationship unless something like really, really, like morally I'm opposed, like we're not getting back as friends like that. But I always am open to the possibility of growth and evolution and change. If I'm looking to work on myself, I'm hoping you are doing the same. Does not mean that we're compatible right now where we are in this journey, but I'm hopeful that we arrive back at a point where both of us are more evolved and we can meet each other's needs in a more balanced way. And hopefully, you've also
Mm-hmm.
grown in that process. But like the worst thing I probably had to say to someone, I don't view you as a bad person. And I actually think you're a great person. I just don't think we are compatible as friends anymore like that.
Yeah, I
And that
know.
sucks.
It sucks to say that. Yeah. I've had a lot. I know your face. I've had so many of those conversations these last 3 years since the pandemic, like breaking up with friends. And I feel like they're so much harder sometimes because they've been around for
Mm-hmm.
so long. And um having to say, like, I don't think we're compatible anymore. Like, it's so
Oh
sad.
my
It's so
God.
true.
It's gutting. There are no support groups for friendship breakups.
No,
Let me
there
tell
are
you.
not. There are not. And we should have them because our culture, our society doesn't um like value platonic relationships the same way it does with romantic ones. And so like, yeah. Oh shoot. Oh sorry.
Oh my gosh, no, that was
My
so funny because you it was like an emphasis moment. Our society
like
does not prioritize.
my internet is like going in and out. But yeah, our society doesn't prioritize platonic relationships like it does with romantic ones. Um, before my internet like fully comes out, where can people work with you? What is the name of your podcast? Tell us
Yes.
everything.
Amazing. Yes. So I currently offer intuitive sessions. One offering, very simple. You can find me on Instagram at agent of Pluto, agent.of.pluto. I'm working on a website, but I feel like the universe has been very abundant with opportunity. So I'm taking my time with it. It should be coming out in November when this new moon in Scorpio hits my ascendant, crossing fingers.
Ooh.
Yes, big one. And let's see, podcast. It's called House of Bravo. You can get it's available on Spotify, Google, Apple, wherever you stream your favorite podcast, really. And if you happen to have a platform we don't have, let us know. We'll gladly add to it. And if you want sort of, regular content, Bravo astrology, pop culture, I post very, very regularly on our Instagram account called at the Cosmic Clubhouse. So definitely, give it a follow, check it out. I love interacting with people in my DMs. I love talking and educating astrology. Um, yeah, so thank you. Honestly, Laura, this was such an amazing chat. I like, whenever you say let's talk about Pluto, I'm like, yes, let's talk about Pluto. And truth be told, I don't think you can talk about Pluto without regaling your own personal experiences around it.
It's very true.
Because a lot of the language, again, is so vast, it's
Mhm.
so big. And, like, I don't know if you've felt this with some of your clients, and I laugh because when I'm like, okay, so like there is going to be like a more integration of the shadow, there is going to be this moment your subconscious is coming real or more prescient. And they're like, I've already done so much work. What are you talking about? I'm like, I'm just a messenger. Don't shoot.
Yeah, I think there's a reason why Pluto is called the shaman's like planet archetype because
Yeah.
when I talk about Pluto with my clients, um if they haven't started doing like deep inner work, like shadow work, some kind of unconscious stuff, it's
Mhm.
hard to understand what you're even like
Yeah.
receiving. You know,
Yeah.
like when you say things like you're going to have to go into your underworld, you're going to have to go into the cave, you're going to have to like start digging. It's like until you are going through it and you have to do the digging yourself, you're going to understand it. But until then, you're like, huh? You know?
Yeah.
Honestly, like Pluto transits are so long. And that's why I'm saying, like, until it starts hitting your natal placements, you're not going to really get it. And that's
Hmm.
okay. And maybe you won't ever get it. So
Yeah.
we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing, right? Like where everyone's on a different experience, and I really believe not everyone is here to really like conquer their journey in
Yeah.
one go,
Yes.
and Pluto is kind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Pluto is kind because Pluto only really makes himself, herself revealed when you just are barely ready for it, and you don't even think you're ready, but it has the confidence in you. You're fucking ready. You're gonna do this, and it's gonna hurt, but it's gonna be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
But also similarly to how we jokingly talked about a buddy system and, going into the underworld, like, Scorpio Pluto energy is very always in partnership to some
Mhm.
degree,
Mhm.
because on your own terms, you can get very stuck in that underworld. And then that's also sort of a lower vibration of it, right? Like you're almost obsessed with the narrative and you're obsessed with uncovering and feeling and understanding that there is no room for that integration, which is what we mean when you come up from that underworld. Like, how do you exist and relate to other people now with this integration, now with this enlightening, unearthing? That's the part I think a lot of people also do miss. You know what I mean? Because it's not just about the excavation, it's about what you do with that information after.
Exactly. And I think that's um the part of the Pluto journey where there's fertility there. It's like a rebirth. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why Pluto is also the Lord of wealth. There's
Yes.
a lot of Plutonian billionaires. There's a lot of people who have Pluto placements like that are very significant in the chart because it also deals with um, wealth, for better or for worse, in our country. But you know what I mean? It
Pluto is power,
is
and
power.
it's very synonymous with wealth.
Yes, it is. So thank you so much for your Pluto guidance and for your wisdom. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and we'll just have to have you back on to talk more about this.
Yeah, always sign me up for Pluto chat or any chat. Pluto will find its way in. So, you know. But much gratitude for you for this time together, especially during this intense energy right now. I know you
Mhm.
feel it. I know I feel it. The collective is really feeling the effects of this build up into eclipse season. So I hope everyone listening is taking a beat, taking a second to really listen to what their body is saying. If you feel out of balance, Mars and Libra, body out of balance, like that type of energy can really surface. So yeah, feel free to lie down.
Yeah, lay down. Thank you so
Later. Good night or goodbye.